You know, we all say our oceans are priceless, but protecting them, well, that's not free. So how do we pay for it? That's what we're diving into today with Blue Finance. We're going to look at a tale of two very different but super powerful ways we're funding the future of our planet's oceans. And let's be real, our oceans are so much more than just pretty scenery. They're this huge economic engine, right? We call it the blue economy, and it's everything: fishing, tourism, even new kinds of energy. The whole point is, yeah, let's use these resources for jobs and growth, but let's do it in a way that doesn't wreck the place. We have to keep that whole ecosystem healthy. So that brings us right back to the big question. If we all agree the oceans are priceless, how in the world do we pay to protect them? Because, restoring coral reefs, building a sustainable future, all of that has a price tag, a big one. So where's the cash going to come from? Okay, so how do we fund our blue planet? Well, it turns out there's this whole field of investment that's growing like crazy, and it's designed to do exactly that. And it's called Blue Finance. Super simple concept, really. It's all about taking money, capital, and pointing it directly at projects that have one single goal: making our oceans healthier and more sustainable. All right, to see how this actually works, let's look at two totally different models. First up, we're heading to Sri Lanka to check out how the big money, we're talking large-scale institutional cash, is getting into the game. So their main tool is something called a blue bond. The easiest way to think about it, it's kind of like crowdfunding for the ocean. But instead of a bunch of us kicking in $20, you've got huge investors. Think pension funds, big corporations. A bank or even a government issues this bond, and boom, they raise a ton of money for very specific, pre-approved ocean projects. And when I say a ton of money, I mean it. The scale here is just massive. In Sri Lanka, the DFCC Bank issued a blue bond worth 3 billion rupees. This is what we're talking about when we say a wholesale approach. It's about raising giant pools of money to tackle the biggest projects out there. But why would these big-time investors even bother? I mean, is it just about feeling good? Not at all. Sure, the positive environmental impact is a huge piece of the puzzle, but these investors are also looking for a solid financial return, They want to diversify their portfolios, get a little brand boost, and line up with their ESG goals. That's environmental, social, and governance stuff. It's really a win-win. And look, this isn't just handing over a blank check. The whole process is super rigorous, which is absolutely key for getting investors to trust it. First, they check every single project to make sure it's legit and meets tough sustainability standards. Then, the money itself is kept in a special account, so it can't be used for anything else. And finally, they have to report on everything, before and after, so everybody knows exactly where the money went and the impact it's actually having. Okay, so this table shows you what the actual investment looks like. These are pretty sophisticated financial products, not just a simple loan. You've got different time frames, different interest rates. You even see options like annual and zero coupon. A zero coupon bond is just one where you get all your interest paid back in one big chunk at the end instead of in little bits each year. Having this kind of flexibility is what makes it so attractive to all sorts of big players. We're talking corporations, foreign funds, you name it. So that's the big picture wholesale approach. Now let's do a complete 180 and look at a totally different model. We're going to head over to the Philippines and see what happens when you bring the money right down to the people on the front lines. Over here, the whole game is different. It's not about attracting huge investment funds. It's about getting cash directly into the hands of the folks whose entire lives depend on the ocean, day in and day out. This is what you'd call the retail side of Blue Finance. A huge player in this is the Land Bank of the Philippines, or Land Bank. They're at the heart of it, running all these different programs designed to support the blue economy. You've got things like Aqua, which is all about fisheries, and another one that helps fund small and medium-sized local businesses. And just look at who can get these loans. It tells you everything you need to know. We're talking individual fishermen, local co-ops, tiny businesses. This is a real bottom-up approach, right? It's all about empowering the community from the inside out. And maybe the most important part of all of this is that it's actually accessible. I mean, a loan doesn't help a fisherman if the interest rate is so high they can't afford it. That's why one of their main programs has a fixed interest rate of just 2%. 2%! That is an absolute game changer. It makes switching to more sustainable gear or practices something a regular person can actually afford to do. And this money goes to real, tangible stuff. We're talking about helping a fisherman buy a new engine that's more efficient, or helping a co-op build a modern fish farm, kind of like the one you see right here. It's about real-world improvements. Okay, so we've seen these two totally different ways of doing things, right? One is playing in the big leagues of global finance, and the other is working through local community banks. Two paths, but they're both trying to get to the same place, a healthier ocean. Let's really put them side by side and see how they stack up. So let's break it down. You've got Sri Lanka on one side, that's the wholesale approach. One giant 3 billion rupee bond, backed by big institutions, funding huge projects. Then on the other side, you've got the Philippines, the retail approach. Lots of smaller individual loans coming from a state bank, going straight to fishermen and local co-ops on the ground. But here's the crazy part. Even though they are so different in how they work, the ultimate goal is exactly the same. Think about it. A bond trader in a high-rise in Colombo and a loan officer in a small town in the Philippines are both working on the exact same problem: how to get long-term, sustainable money flowing into the blue economy. Okay, so what's the big takeaway here? Why is it so important that we have these two totally different ways of doing blue finance? Well, the main takeaway is pretty simple. There's no magic bullet. The problems our oceans are facing are just too big and too complicated for one solution. What we really need is a whole toolkit of financial options. We need stuff that works for the big players on Wall Street, and we need stuff that works for the small communities on the local waterfront. And that right there is the real power of blue finance. It's the bridge, It connects that abstract world of global money and investment to the very real, on-the-ground needs of our planet and the people who call it home. So, this story of two different approaches really shows us that finance doesn't have to be this separate thing that's disconnected from the health of our planet. In fact, it can be one of the most powerful tools we have to protect it. And that just leaves us with one final big question to think about. With the future of our planet on the line, what's the next wave for finance going to be?